Welcome back. Again, as I was saying, plenty of technical difficulties. It seems that for the last few minutes there was no sound coming in. So let's begin from the top once again, okay? So I'm gonna press play. So let's listen to the music and then I'm gonna explain everything I just said. Here we go. Okay, now I can tell that it's working. You can hear me. You could hear the music. Perfect. Now let me explain what happened. There was some issues with the software and the connection between my microphone and the output of the music. The software we're rocking right now for mixing music. But got addressed, and now everything is working correctly. Now, for those of you who are new to this, and this basically should be everybody because I am just getting started with this concept. This software you got in front of you is called Luna, okay? And Luna is something that is known as a DAW. A DAW stands for Digital Audio Workstation, and that means that it's a software designed for you to work on audio. You could be, for example, recording, editing. You could be recording, you could be editing, you could be mixing, which is what we're doing today right now. And also you can, of course, master. The thing is this, when you hit the mixing stage, which is what we're gonna be doing tonight, is right after you already recorded the entire piece in the studio. A normal workflow would be the following. Let's say that you're with your band in the rehearsal room, that's where everything should start, coming up with an idea, developing it, and composing the entire piece. Or if you happen to be a solo musician, well, you composed everything using paper or, well, just acoustic guitar and stuff. Then, once that happens, you hit the recording studio, where every single one of the different instruments will be recorded individually. Not necessarily standard, but it's the most common practice, because there are records that are still today being produced, everybody playing together at the same time. The thing is that you can imagine that that comes with plenty of difficulties, because if one of the band members drops the ball while the track's playing, the entire take could be ruined by that very mistake. But the modern way to do it, and it's basically the industry standard, is everybody recording each of their parts one by one. And what you got here on Luna is exactly that. You can see here that we got the bass performance here, is this orange take. Then we got the guitars, rhythmic guitar is the green. And then we got the lead solo that you heard, which is kind of reddish pink. And synthesizers, purple, of course. All of the drums, as you can tell, they are actually recorded in different takes, because you got everything from the kick drum all the way down to, let me disarm this, because this is something that is starting to bug me. Perfect. Why is that happening? The thing is that this software has voice commands. I gotta do something whenever I go live, because it's actually triggering the whole thing by itself. But whatever. Now, you can see here that we got all of the different elements of our drum kit recorded independently. But that doesn't mean that they were actually tracked one by one. When you see, for example, a drummer in the recording studio, you're gonna see them usually surrounded by microphones. Of course, they are sitting in front of the drum kit, and the drum kit itself is gonna be surrounded by microphones. Those microphones are actually the ones that are capturing each of the different elements of the sound that the drum kit is producing. So, with that in mind, you can see here why I got different takes for just the drums. And everything that is yellow, orangey is drums. So, now, what do I think about the mix? And this is the moment in which we have to understand and set the parameters and the boundaries of what we're meant to be doing with our mix. Since my plan is to make this sound similar to the records from the 80s, my direction should be following such aesthetic. We already have a sound that is very similar to the 80s, but it's not necessarily there yet. It's kind of muddy. By muddy, I mean it's not clear enough. And also, it has a little bit of harshness, for a lack of a better term. It's a bit too kind of abrasive sounding, and it's not my cup of tea. Particularly the snare. Let's listen to the snare right now. I want you to pay attention to the sound of the snare. Okay, we got a question. Here, I notice you have an Avantone mix cube. Is it for checking mono? It is for checking mono, actually. Great question, and somebody's actually eagle-eyed. Thank you, DJ Victor Nova. Yes, it's actually an Avantone that I use for mono mixing. For those of you who don't know, or let me rephrase it, mono mixing stands for actually summing up everything while mixing into mono. Let me show you. Well, the screen is going to show us in a few minutes well, you got it here, actually. And that's very useful when positioning stuff. When listening to music in a mixing environment, we have control over the positioning of our instruments. Let's do it with an example. And if you're wondering, Victor, if it's good, it is excellent for mono monitoring. I totally recommend it. I have a switcher here that allows me to swap from the mono to the stereo sets that I got here. I got 2 stereo pairs of speakers. Now, let's listen to something that could be panned, which is the proper terminology. Let me find it first. Lead. Here it is. My lead guitar is here. See what's gonna happen, okay? I'm gonna be moving the positioning of the panning of the lead, and I'm gonna also show you the mixer itself. See what happens. Oh, wait a second. Wrong. Now it's working. Here it is. You can see that I'm moving the knob, and if you haven't seen it, it's this guy over here. Okay? This guy, look. Okay? So, I will solo the sound of the lead guitar and see what happens when you move stuff around, okay? Okay? That's what panning stands for. And coming back to your question, Victor, you were thinking on getting one, but you were wondering if the mono summing from the DAW does the same. It's very much the same. Okay. For example, Luna. I don't know if Luna has a mono sum in the end. I think it doesn't. But for example, you can have a plugin. Now that we're getting into matter. Let me find a plugin that I use for such a thing. Yeah, here it is. This is a software that a plugin, which is a plugin for those of you who are not familiar with terminology. It's a little piece of software that you load inside of your main software, your DAW, okay? And this guy is used for referencing. We're gonna be tackling that a little bit later on during this process. But this guy has a summing to mono function over here. And it does very much the same as what I do when I switch to mono over here on my gear. I haven't seen any form of difference, audible difference, when doing it with something like this, like software compared to the hardware. Because I think in the end, the sum is still happening in the box because it's what is coming out of your speakers. Makes sense, right? So, in this case, it's a physical summing. In the case of the software, it's a digital summing. And I would encourage you to get in one for that very reason, okay? It's very good, Victor, for real. Totally recommend it. So, now, explaining why, for those of you who are not familiar with this. It's very important to have, or it's very useful to have a mono monitoring, because as you saw, I can move stuff around the stereo spectrum, which is the speakers, the space in between your speakers and your headphones. And by doing so, we can open up a space. I will press play from the top, and I want you to pay attention to the stuff that is coming from the center, okay? The mid section of the stereo field. And try to define which instruments are coming out from that. Here we go, from the very top. Yes, you're correct, Victor. The snare, the bass are set in the center, and the rest is coming from the sides, to a certain degree. The one that is still also coming from the center is the lead guitar. The thing is that since it already has a little bit of reverb, which is the sound of space, and I'm applying a set of, I will show them in a few minutes. Since that reverb is coming also from the entirety of the stereo spectrum, it could give the illusion of the lead guitar being kind of not necessarily set to the center. It's not necessarily a rule, but it's closer to a rule of thumb. If you analyze any of the music that you listen to on a daily basis, and you do what Victor did, which is focusing your attention on trying to figure out which of the instruments are coming from the different positions of your stereo field, you will realize that it's very common for you to find the bass, the kick, and the snare usually coming from the center, full force. Other elements, and there are certain guitar solos, for example, from renowned music that might be a little bit to the side and a little bit to the left, unless you're the Beatles. Because I don't remember which album it is, that as soon as they got access to stereo technology, they put the drums on one side and the kick and the bass on the other side. It's bananas. The same happens with "L.A. Woman" by The Doors. It's very, very funky the way they used the stereo panning, and I think it's very similar to what's going on right now with the whole Atmos situation. Atmos is a completely different beast. Right now, my rig is only available. It only allows me to mix in stereo, which is the most common sound production style, right? But little by little, Atmos is becoming a thing. Atmos, instead of using just 2 speakers, it uses 9, and you have a bunch on the ceiling. Okay, it's weird. It's massive. I'm learning my way around it. I'm truly thinking in expanding my rig and turning this monstrosity into an Atmos rig. But later, okay? And I don't want to run before we walk. So coming back to the mix. Now understand the positioning of our instruments. It's time to decide if they are dark or bright. What does that mean? When something is bright, has plenty of the sizzle, the high end, is a little bit more defined sounding. When something is dark, it sounds like this, okay? But that means that it's not necessarily bad. For example, a bass guitar and a kick drum need a bit of that dark sound because it's where the heftiness of the music comes from. So let's begin mixing a little bit more. I mentioned before effects. Previous session, if I recall correctly, we played around with this guy. This is the Lexicon 224. Super popular reverb from the 80s. It's a sound that is defined the entirety of the decade, and we played around with it. We used it on basically most of the instrumentation. That's why it's making the whole thing feel a bit airy, right? Here Victor is saying, what do you think about adding a bit of width on the bass? I usually add bass lane by tone projects. I'm not familiar with that tool, but I think it's a good idea. My way to do that is this one. It's gonna be a little bit nerdy for those of you who are not that familiar with this, but I will try my best to explain what I'm about to show you. Okay, we got this area over here, this particular series of effects. Okay, this is my template. A template is already a preset series of effects and routing. I move the audio around. That allows me to mix every single session in the same way. For those of you who are already doing it or are learning your way around it, I totally recommend you to develop your own template based on your workflow. But we understand the concept of plugins, and for those of you who are familiar, this is not necessarily my fully fleshed out technical take on the mixing. I have a channel dedicated to that, but if you happen, like Victor, to have any more technical questions, feel free to do it, okay? Okay, so this guy, it's a delay, and delay creates repetitions. The thing is that this guy is a stereo delay. And now that we understand the difference between the signal that comes from the center and the signals that comes from the sides, I usually use this delay to create repetitions of the sound of my bass, but coming from the sides with care, because we need to preserve the mono compatibility, okay? We need to keep the heft and the punch of the bass still in the center, but when we put it with total taste to the sides, we make the mix feel much more put together, if that makes sense to you, okay? So, love Supernova. Luna is very nice looking, I gotta tell you. And it's a very useful doll. It has, since it's a very early development, it's developing and catching up with the rest of the big bad boys. But I can tell you that as it is right now, it has become my favorite mixing doll, hands down. Now, let's get to it. What's the point of mixing or something? No, I'm going to be mixing right now. This is all about mixing, and I'm going to be explaining the whole process while I do it. Two Novas in the chat. What are the chances of that? Oh, look at that. Yes. Look at that. Okay. So, been speaking for way too long. So it's time to make some music. So I'm going to press play. I need to refresh my ears. I need to be aware of what am I about to do. Okay? So here we go. From the top. Enough. You gotta be like that. I already find the first problem. My snare is a little bit too bright sounding. I think this is too daunting. Let me show you a different way. Right now, I have this, which is my channel strip. It's very similar to what I have here. Why? Because I can control this device. Well, through the use of this device, I can control what I got in front of me, the plugin. Now, since I find the snare to be extremely bright sounding, it's a little bit too like, okay? I'm gonna press play, and I'm gonna begin cutting. Pay attention to that knob that is moving on the screen, okay? The more I press it, the more I push it, the darker the sound of the snare is gonna become. What do you think? It became a little bit too dark, don't you think? But I have a second move. Since I only used this knob, this is a filter. And the filter is gonna cut everything from the point in which I leave it. Everything after the filter is gonna go through. Everything before the filter is gonna be removed, okay? I'm interested, it's interesting in outboard. Do you use something for real gear, from real gear? Oh, my name is Adam. Look, yes, actually, gear-wise, we're actually rocking this. The signal is being processed through this rack right now. Because my setup is actually a hybrid setup. It's a combination between the stuff that I got here on the computer and a combination of my toys over here. And I also happen to have another rack here. But for today's purposes, we're gonna only be using the summing capability. If you want me to explain that, I will gladly do it. Nice to meet you, Nova. But I will do it next week because I didn't set up the cameras for that one, okay? But I will. Thank you for reminding me. So stay tuned and consider subscribing if you find this useful and if you want to see what happens next week. Because, yeah, I need to set up the camera for me to explain the whole process. But actually, we're using a good chunk of analog gear right now. The thing is that I have it set in a way that is always static. Because is my sound, if that makes sense to you. All of my stuff is coming out of my digital stuff, going through the analog rig, and then it's summed up digitally once again, and it's what we're hearing. Thank you, Nova. It's a work in progress, but it's been a good chunk of time me doing this. So little by little, I got to this point. So if I can tell you something, effort and dedication truly pays off if you have plenty of discipline. So. Again, this is designed for questions, so feel free to ask anything, okay? Regarding the mix, of course. So, right now, we cut a good chunk of the sound of the brightness, or we kind of darkened the sound of the snare. It's not bad, but it kind of got lost in the mix. Let's listen to it again. It's not bad, but can you see this? Oh. My mistake, wrong button. Can you see this? That red light is terrible. Roxanne should turn off the red light. That's the police reference. So I failed at it, sorry. That means one thing. We're clipping. We're hitting too hard the virtual console. Is even though we're dealing with plugins, with digital stuff, we can still clip it. We can still surpass the input. And is usually there for a reason. So what I'm going to do is going to lower the amount of energy being fed to this circuit. So I'm going to clear so we can have a proper reset point, and I'm going to lower the gain, which is controlling how much of the snare is coming into the whole apparatus. If I press play, we're going to have a less loud, quieter sounding snare, but it's not gonna clip. Now, you saw that I pushed this fader slightly, because by reducing the impact or the input of the snare coming through the channel strip, which is the name of this device, is what you see on a console, okay? I realized that we lost a good chunk of the order of our mix. The snare went a little bit too much to the backdrop because it's not loud enough. But now that I push it back a little bit, we got back the entirety of the sound, as it used to be. I like it that way. So now we can feel comfortable to attack some of the high end, because I like the sound of the snare, but it's a little bit too bright. So let's boost a little bit of it was a little bit too bright, but now that I cut the brightness, I feel that it's a little bit too dark. So I'm gonna use a different section of my channel strip, this guy over here. This is the band that is controlling the highs, okay? And the highs, you can imagine, is where the sizzle, the stuff happens. I'm gonna just solo the snare and get familiar with the equalizer. Okay, so now let me explain. When you work with this knob, this is, when pushed to the side, is adding. When pushed to the side, is cutting. So imagine that you are increasing or decreasing the volume of the band, the frequency area, selected by this second knob. Okay? Here, I read somewhere that Fleetwood Mac Rumors, this is coming from DJ Victor Nova, Rumors, great album, and probably my favorite by them. Well, no, Tusk is also very good. It's the best recording of all time. Just some info for us, guys. No, actually, it's not necessarily a wrong statement. For me, Rumors is one of my favorite sounding records, but being frank with you, and my personal pick would be either The Lexicon of Love by ABC. That record slaps, man. Sounds incredible. Another would be Eye in the Sky by the Alan Parsons Project. And another candidate would be Asia by, oh, damn it. What's the name of these guys? Asia. Oh, please remind me. It's super popular. Black Cow. Oh, damn it. I forgot the name of these guys. It truly get out of my head. But those three albums, I always consider them to be the top tier sounding albums. And I always use those records whenever I get into a room to get familiar with the sound of the speakers and the acoustics of the environment. Okay? So those records are fantastic sounding. But Rumors is also excellent. And it's probably it's up among those guys when it comes to the quality of the sound. Now, coming back to the mix. Please remind me the name. Oh, because it's not Simon Garfunkel. I love those guys, but I can't remember the name. Okay, whatever. Making a fool out of myself in front of everybody. But whatever. Mixing. Since I'm going to be using this band to bring a little bit of the sizzle and the attack and the snappiness of the snare, but trying to not go overboard because we already have a kind of bright sounding snare. So let's see. Okay, that wasn't that bad, right? The thing is this, and super important point, so I gotta go big. When mixing, it's a huge mistake to solo stuff and do surgical stuff such as equalizing in solo. Why? You're mixing. First, let's define what mixing stands for. It's the interaction between different elements mixed together, right? So by definition, if you solo something, you're no longer mixing. Makes sense, right? So very important thing to keep in mind when mixing music. Never mixing solo. Solo is used for stuff such as what we're doing right now. Getting familiar with the tone, understanding the circuitry we're rocking, and seeing what's gonna be doing to the sound we're gonna be applying this effect to. Okay? So now we have an idea of what kind of sound we're gonna get. It's a matter of doing it to taste. So here we go. Pressing play. Now in context. Would you look at that? Sounds better, right? Here, Supernova is saying, okay, let's find out what we're listening. My choice. Metallica, Fighters, Alice in Chains, Sting, Depeche Mode, almost everything from the 90s. If I may add a part of... well, no, actually, Alice in Chains. I would pick Alice in Chains. Out of the bunch, I would rather deal with Alice in Chains because 90s Metallica... well, it's 90s Metallica, right? Black Album, and the Black Album is awesome, but the other albums are kind of... But Sting is also a good pick, man. Yeah. So, now, we got the sound of the snare kind of snappy, but now I'm detecting something else. I think a good chunk of the sound, of this bright sound we're getting, is coming from this effect, the reverb. Got me? So, the reverb sounds like this. It's whole. As you can hear, is the effect, is the huge thing that is turning everything bigger and bigger and bigger. If I mute it out, see what happens. Works. The thing is that I think we got too much of brightness coming out of this guy. So we're not going to be rocking this as of right now. So I want you to pay attention to this area. Those controls, even though this unit kind of looks daunting, it is not. It's actually easy to understand. This, and you can see that I'm already projecting what I'm about to do. This fader, it's controlling the treble decay. And treble is obviously the high end. So what I'm gonna do is press play once again, but I will be taking down little by little the treble coming out of the reverb, the effect, adding the sha, in hopes, and I think it's gonna work, of boosting just the right amount. So here we go. It's getting better. Am I fully happy with it? Not necessarily, because I still feel that the snare is a little bit too bright. So let's see. Let's see what's going on with snare. My snare, it's only right now rocking this, so I think I can either cut more or boost less. That's a more of a good question. And here, what about? Well, I'm going to join the conversation. What would be my favorite bands? In my case, and I know nobody asked, but I will give my 2 cents anyway. In my case, I happen to be a huge fan of Iron Maiden, Pink Floyd as well, and Dream Theater. Those would be my top three, because I happen to be a huge progressive rock fan. I love prog rock, but also happen to be huge into jazz. Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Bill Evans, all of those guys, fantastic. Yeah, those would be my picks. Here, Victor, a DJ, Victor Novi saying Scorpions, Robert Tapper, yeah, good picks. Excellent. Oh yeah, and Robert Trower as well. I would throw Robert Trower to my picks as well. I know Scorpions is awesome, man. The question is this: which version of Scorpions? Because you got the early stuff, which is much more on the kind of more prog rock kind of thing, and then you got badass Scorpions from the 80s, which is hard rock, and both are fantastic, just very different. So let's see. For this style of music, it's pretty good to use gated verb for snare. Exactly. Supernova, you know your stuff. Yeah, totally. Because we're going to be creating this. For those of you who know, gated verb stands for the effect. You have heard it on every Phil Collins records from the 80s. And it's basically, we're going to get the but it's going to be closed. It's going to be removed as soon as the snare is no longer going through. I will show you later how to do it, because it's kind of complex, but it's not necessarily that complex. Okay, so, but I will get there later, okay, because mixing is kind of complex and it's a series of steps. So, we got this bad boy already kind of there, but my plan is to find the culprit of this kind of obnoxious high end, and there are 2 ways to find it. As I said, I can cut more or boost less, because remember, we're removing high end and also boosting a little bit of high end. So let's see. You know what? I think it's not the snare. Yeah, it's not the snare. I think it's the room microphones. Let me show you. Over here we got the microphones that were used to record the sound coming out of the entirety of the kit. It sounds like this. We already got a good chunk of that high-end energy that I don't necessarily like. But also we got the mono overhead, which is once again a microphone recording the top of the drum kit. This is not the one that is creating the noise that I don't like, because this is super dark, clearly super dark. And we also got the room stereo microphones, which were used to record this kit from afar. And it's a stereo, so we got 2 takes. Let's see. It sounds like this. Okay, I think we got the problem. So, let's hit it. How are we gonna do it? We're gonna use the power of Christ to compel it. No, we're gonna be using, and without trying to be blasphemous, we're gonna be using the console again. We're gonna be using the equalizer. First, let's find the problematic area. This is a moment in which using solo makes sense. And how or what we're gonna do it? We're gonna do the following. I already soloed the sound. It sounds like this. Okay? Now, I'm gonna first try the cutting. Maybe cutting would work. Here we go. But I want you to pay attention to this. And this is super important, mind you. We are getting out of this guy the sound of our cymbals as well. And if I go super bananas on the removal of the high end, try to find the cymbals here. Big problem, right? So how to do it? First, this already shows us that we cannot go ballistics on the filter cutting the highs. I will use it because I also find a little bit of the harshness, a little bit harsh, the sound of the cymbals once the entire track is playing. But we will be using the bands. And in this case, I'm going to use the red one, not the red one, and the plugin is red. This, the high once again, but instead of using it as before, you just saw that I pressed the button. And this button means that instead of making the shape of the equalizer, before it was a shelving. Imagine that it's flat, and when I started to boost, it's going like this, and then like this. By the press of this button, instead of doing that shape, it's going to be a pick. So I'm going to be moving a particular, that pick across different positions. Okay? So I'm going to be using this band in an attempt to find that one, that particular problem, the extra sound of the brightness of the snare. And that way I can hopefully get away with murder, because that way I don't have to destroy the sound of the cymbals. And here DJ Victor No is saying, been really enjoying the 32 Classic channel strip and Clear Mountains 86.8. Yeah, fantastic. I'm very familiar with the 32 Classic. Why? Because I also happen to be a huge fan of Mixbus, Harrison Mixbus, the entire software. Which you mix in the entire on a virtual recreation of the Harrison desk. It's excellent. Right now, this setup is using the SSL stuff, but I actually happen to have other live streams on which I'm mixing everything from start to finish using the Mixbus. Okay, so let's play around with this bad boy. We're gonna do it in solo because we're gonna be trying to get familiar with the sound. Okay. Okay, what you just saw is me boosting, going stupid, full on idiot, and finding the moment in which I hate the sound that I hear. That's a very common technique and it's very useful. The thing is that if you go super bananas, everything's gonna sound like ass, okay? So you gotta do it with care. But now we have an idea of where the problem is. I'm gonna do it in context because again, we're mixing music, we're not playing around with equalizers. Getting somewhere. Now I'm going to try the same, but on the channel strip containing the stereo field, the stereo overheads. Because if you remember, those also had a little bit of that super bright thing that I didn't like. So, command control, once again, and now that we kind of have an idea of where the problem is, I could even pinpoint it using the in solo. Here we go. You know what? I don't like this move because in my pursuit of getting rid of that super bright snare, I killed off a good chunk of my liveliness, the energy coming from the cymbals. So I'm gonna bring it back, and I'm gonna use a different band. Instead of using this one, the highs, I'm gonna use the mid highs. And there is a difference, because you can see that instead of just having 2 knobs, we're now rocking 3. What does that mean? When you're rocking 3 knobs, in this case, we're dealing with one that is controlling the Q. The Q is gonna tell. Please remember the shape of the bands, okay? We already dealt with one that goes like this, and we also dealt with one that goes like this, like a pick. What the Q is gonna do is gonna tell how wide or narrow that pick is gonna be, and that width or that narrowness on the band is gonna be reflected on the frequencies that are gonna be affected by this. Remember that music is frequencies going through air. Every sound you hear in the universe is actually frequencies, and the tonality and the actual note you hear is actually a frequency. It could be 200 hertz, it could be 400, it could be 40,000. Well, 40,000 is possible, but you won't be able to hear it because our human hearing range ends at 20,000. Okay? So, if we're going to be using this mid band, we got extra control. Now we can actually change how many frequencies we're going to be attacking with this bad boy. So let's do it. It worked!
Of course!
Yeah! That was good. Very good. And also allows me to do the next move. Now I feel that the cymbals are dark. How to fix it? Easy. Let's use the high band. Again, this guy. But instead of cutting and using the pick, I'm going to be using the shelf, which is going to be a gentle slope, and it's going to bring up everything high. Okay? And remember, we control the point on which that happens. So here we go. I'm going to let this song roll a bit longer so we can actually see the whole thing in effect. Way better, right? Way better. Now, as Victor now is saying, would it be possible to brighten up the guitars? Of course, we truly need to brighten them up because they are kind of dark sounding. Let me show you the sound of the guitars. We got guitar on the left and guitar on the right because we're using the traditional panning, the wide sounding guitars, okay? That's a very common technique that has been used ever since we had the chance to multi-track. Sounds like this. First the one coming from the left. So it's gonna be coming from this side. Nice sounding, but they're super dark sounding, especially now that we're starting to push the energy coming from the drums. And here Victor is saying, for me, I would like the guitars to stand out when it comes in. Maybe it's just no, you're right. You're 100% correct, Victor. Why? Let me explain. When you are mixing music, and whenever we're doing the exercises here in the channel, when we are analyzing music together and stuff, right? One of the things that I always try to draw your attention towards is the order in which the elements are presented to us, because that kind of order is what gives the sense of musicality to a record. That stands for which element is louder, which element is closer, which element is far away from you as a listener. okay? And in this case, the guitars are actually the driving force, both of them, because we got the lead and the one that is playing those super open-ended chords, giving us that kind of Toto-esque kind of vibe, a little bit of Mike Landau, stuff like that. But it's far from sounding like that because I'm not Steve Lukather or Mike. It's me playing the guitar. Not that bad, I gotta admit, but it's not, well, those guys are awesome. Now, coming back to this. Yes, there are ways to do it. Either pushing the faders or using the EQ to make them more present. As it is right now, we are using a very early stage of the mix, or we're dealing with a very early stage of the mix. We're recently coming out of the whole let's organize the thing. We already did the gain stage. It's kind of sounding like music. No, but it's kind of sounding like makes sense. Now the next stage, which is what we're starting off today, is starting to shine up the different elements. So coming back to this, and what Victor is saying is correct. We need a little bit more guitar. Are you using LCR mixing? Yes, I am. I like to do that very often. What is LCR mixing? Left, right, center. Okay, that's a very common technique. Sometimes, or I will go a little bit nerdier on you. There are several schools of thought because mixing music is not something that is carved in stone. It's something that it's more about good taste, okay? But there are several techniques that are kind of universally accepted as being very effective and efficient. And one of them is LCRC when it comes to guitars, which is I will have the rhythm guitars coming from the sides and the lead guitars coming from the center. Why? Because it kind of makes sense. Because you're going to be using the guitars on the side to add full-on punch or width to the sound of the guitar, because it's covering the both ends of the stereo spectrum. But there is also the school of thought of using not going hard band, okay? Because LCR stands for wherever goes to the sides is full on to the sides, no questions asked. But there is another school of thought which tells you that do it with care. Put them slightly to the sides and play around with the faders, the panning, because you got everything from center to the right and everything to the center to left, from center to the left. Why sticking to just absolutes? And I happen to agree with that statement. Most of the time I like to play around with the positioning. Right now, because it felt good to me for this mix, I went for the LCR. Okay? But sometimes I do it like this. Let's do the exercise. I'm going to show you right now. Let me take you to the guitars. Here, guitar L and guitar R. Okay, and as you can tell, I was messing around with the fader, the knobs, but they were supposed to be like this. They were like this at the beginning. Okay. I'm going to remove the lead for us to focus our attention directly to the sound of the sides. Okay. And then I'm going to be moving, getting them closer to the center. And tell me which one do you prefer. To my taste, this position takes the cake, or hard pant, because it opens up the space beautifully. And since we're dealing with chorus affected, it's an effect on the guitar. That's why it sounds kind of wavy sounding. It's already kind of wide sounding. Let's go to the center just to ruin our day. Look at that. See how it sounds like. The mix kind of collapses, right? Feels kind of, I don't know, it's super nosy. So I'm gonna put it once again to the sides. And look, in this case, I even would go a little bit, not hard band, because I like the sound. That makes sense, right? Especially if I bring back the lead one. Let's go for a section where the lead happens. this is exactly what I meant. The entirety of the mix collapses once the three guitars are coming from the center. But if I push them, and actually Nova here, Supernova, not Victor Nova, meant 7070. Yeah, that was probably where I decided to leave them at the end, because it felt a little bit better than hard panning. Let me put them somewhere there, 70 something, yeah, somewhere like that. And you don't have to do it mimic each side exactly, okay? Sometimes it works, having them one slightly closer to the center than the other, because that creates a little bit of a much more wider sound, if that makes sense. Now, let me catch up with the comments here. Now, DJ Victor Novi saying, I can imagine mixing rock is difficult because imagine you're using a good reference from the 90s, but it still needs to make it sound like it belongs in 2026 without offending the listeners that like, I mind classic songs from 90s. Tough choices. You are right, Victor. And this is probably one of the reasons why I started the purpose of this channel, which is the whole music analysis thing. You gotta learn how to listen to different styles of mixing, because there are completely different ways to approach to a sound, but there are moments in which they are clearly the result of their times. For example, the 90s, early 90s records, I usually like to define them like they have the Vanilla Ice sound. And that applies to rock. Why? Because they are kind of hyped up in the higher end. They have plenty of energy in the highs, and a very punchy and defined low end. And they are, dynamically speaking, still very, very much alive. They are not as compressed as later records from the late 90s, early 2000s. They are overly compressed and full on bass, including rock music. And why am I pointing my finger when I say rock music? Because rock music is usually the one that is referred to be like is the most genuine and raw sounding. No, that's not real. It's being doctored as every single kind of record. The thing is that the aesthetics and the approaches you have to follow when mixing rock are very different from the ones that you would do if I were mixing electronic music, which I happen to mix quite often as well. It's a completely different set of aesthetics. The techniques are similar, or if not the same, because you're actually, working with sound, right? The thing is that when you are working with electronic music, the aesthetics dictates a particular path. Make sense? Now, okay, here, Live Supernova. Yeah, that's why we're using the 2024 and the vintage stuff. Yeah, because we're looking for that characteristic sound. If I were dealing with something a little bit more grungy, like Alice in Chains, depending on which era of Alice in Chains, because if you pick, for example, Man in the Hole, listen to the snare, and it's still using that 80s sounding snare, the pa, pa. But then you go for something a little bit more, much more modern, like, what's the name? This one, Jar of Flies, Nutshell. That one is dry. And also even the acoustic nature of the record, the instrumentation is different, because we're still dealing with the band, right? But in that record, if I recall, that particular song is using brushes instead of sticks. And the sound of everything is kind of darker sounding, it's a little bit more muffled, less high end, is much more alive, is less compressed, because we don't have that much distortion. So you get my point, right? So it's very much you understanding the intricacies of the different kind of music, and also have a deep understanding of the different stages of this particular genre. Make sense? I hope it does. Because, this is, if I can summarize it into something, it's very much kind of, you need a good chunk of encyclopedic understanding. You gotta spend a good chunk of time listening to music. How terrible, right? Now, here, DJ Victor is asking, what do I think about YouTube's technically, from a technical perspective, sounding-wise? They sound great. I have never heard a bad, probably the one from the early 2000s. And it's not necessarily because it was style at the time, right? Going for that super compressed. But Joshua Tree is a very good selling album. I wouldn't use them as a reference point from an audiophile-like perspective, right? But they are usually top notch. The edge guitar is usually fantastic sounding. It's very, very clean, very defined. And I love the way that the band tends to sound on the records because they kind of have this vibe, live band vibe, don't you think? It's amazing. So let me catch up. Imagine Dragons Believers sounds amazing to me. Not sure if they are rock. They are closer to pop rock, Imagine Dragons, being very frank, but they are very, very good sounding as well, man. The aesthetics of Imagine Dragons is leaning much more closer to the whole pop stylistic decisions that I was describing before than something raw. So they're pretty rocky. Okay, so let's keep rocking. Speaking of rock. Now, what do I feel? I kind of feel that the mix start to feel better, but we're gonna hit the most important moment of any mix, in my opinion, which is mixing the stereo bus. What is that? Stereo bus stands for this. All of the channels that we got in front of us, all of them are being sent to one channel to one channel that is the stereo one, which is the one that is receiving everything coming in. Okay? And for that, we're gonna be compressing. We're gonna be using that bad boy that I have here as well. And if you doubt it, look this. I'm moving it. Okay? So why is this important? We're gonna begin to glue the entirety of the mix together. Usually speaking, I do it on my rack. I have a compressor that I use for this purpose. But since we're going to be mixing most of our stuff with plugins, I'm going to keep it here because I'm still working with several projects right now, and I don't know if I can commit leaving the mix for next week. Okay? So, what to listen for? What to look for when it comes to the sound? And this is the tricky part, because compression is something that takes years for even mixing engineers to truly understand. A compressor is gonna be creating this sound. Let me give you a visual cue. Going full on Barney the Dinosaur mode. We got our sound. Okay, it's coming like this. This is the entirety of our stereo field, the stereo mix. Let me make sure that it's visible to you. If it's not working, let me go for the one on top. That's not the one on top. This one. Yeah, that's better, right? Okay. What a compressor is going to do is the following. We're going to set boundaries to the loudness of the record. Okay? And it's going to be controlled with one of the different controls on the compressor. What I'm going to do is going to make the boundaries to be somewhere there, probably. These are the ones that are out. So this is not working, okay? By doing so, my sound wave is gonna be forced to be squashed here. And if, for example, there is a moment on which the output of the music doesn't reach the compressor, what is gonna happen is the following. Let's pretend that it's going like this, okay? And here is not as loud. The compressor is gonna force it to go as loud as the rest. Okay? That's a very, 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 very super simplified explanation of how a compressor works. But if you mind it working that way, once I begin applying it, you will be able to hear it. It's not easy. It's going to take several passes for you to get familiar with the sound of a compressor, especially one that is applied to the sound of the stereo mix. But you will with practice. And now, I like to always try to do the first pass of this, the stereo field thing, the stereo compressor, as early as possible, because that way my mix is feeling already put together. And let me check comments here before I begin doing crazy stuff. Here, Supernova Live saying, 5 years ago I asked a cigarette from Mark Nidman, who was a producer of Mayan. Okay, look at that. Flight of the Cosmic Hip Hop. Wow. Yeah, actually, good take, man, by Bella Fleck. It's one of the best sounding songs I came across. Yeah. Not rock, no, it's very, very good. Actually. Yeah, that record is excellent. Yeah, Victor, you're referring to the one by Bela Fleck and the Flecktones, right? The Flight of the Cosmic Hippo, because I'm terrible with names, if you might recall from the videos. But I think, yeah, if it's the one that you're referring to, yeah, that thing sounds amazing. I think it won a few Grammys, if I recall. Now, mixing again. We're gonna be squashing. I'm gonna go bananas for a while, just for you to get familiar with the sound of a compressor. And it sounds like this. We're gonna be applying it to the entirety of the mix. Sounds better, right? It feels much more je ne sais quoi, right? Like very well put together in a way that truly is starting to make the music feel like it's actually a record. Of course, plenty of things that have to be addressed, but the difference is staggering. I hope you managed to hear it. Again, if you couldn't, it's not a problem. This is difficult for you to detect, especially when you are getting started. But imagine it being like controlling the entirety of the mix, and by boosting the stuff that is not as loud as the rest, it's starting to make it feel more, yeah, cohesive, like more put together. Okay, so yeah, I nailed it. Yeah, it was the one from Bela Fleck. Yeah, fantastic record. That thing is insane sounding. If you have heard that before, please do yourself a favor. It's fantastic. You might not like it. Well, no, yeah, you might like it. It's kind of an easy listen. And if you are not aware who they are, Bela Fleck is a fantastic jazz musician who happens to be a banjo player. Yeah, I can use that. So, yeah, but and the music is very much a weird combination between bluegrass and jazz, but it's more contemporary jazz than yeah, it's contemporary jazz rather than smooth jazz, I would say, rather than contemporary, with bluegrass. Fantastic sounding records and fantastic music. Very good. Okay, it worked. It's taking us there. But now I will apply a little bit of EQ to the entirety of the mix, similar to what you do when you're rocking with your stereo. So I'm gonna go for an equalizer. On this section here, I got control and access to the different elements of a mix. Let me show you how it sounds before we go. Okay, now I'm going to apply an EQ. Here on my DAW, I have this selector. Let me find equalizer, where is it? Equalization. I already have most of my library of plugins properly organized, so I can trust what the equalizer is going to show me. So in this case, I think it's going to be a good idea to use something that is kind of mellow sounding. Maybe this guy, Hitsville. It looks retro because it's modeled after a very retro unit from the Hitsville studio. So it's Motown's kind of sounding. I know you will be saying, dude, we're doing this kind of Whitesnake, kind of Toto-like sound. Yes, we are, but it will work. So what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to try to push a little bit more of the low end to a little bit more of punch. And also maybe controlling a bit the highs once again, but tame them, not cutting. Because with this, if I go bananas to this, I'm gonna kill everything because we're inserting this to the entirety of our mix. Here we go. First, let's get familiar with the sound. That was good, right? Pay attention to the kick. was good, but I think it's adding too much of low mids. So I'm gonna use the next band, and I'm gonna cut a little bit. Yeah. Now let's see the sub. I can live with that. It's not sounding fully correct because this is a series of steps, but it's getting there, man. I like it because, for example, with these moves, we got more bass, and the kick drum in particular got more energy. I probably could leave this as it is, and then move over to the rest of my channels. The thing is this: we're almost getting close to the end of today's live stream. But now we're at it. Let's take a look at the sound of our bass. The bass is right now controlled by this channel strip. And coming back to studio, okay, you're rocking Studio One. Studio One is a good DAW, man. I'm not gonna tell you that it sucks. I didn't know that it was. It's been unstable for a while and glitchy. I happen not to be a Studio One user, but I can tell you, Luna, it's very much there, man. It's very good. I think the strongest point Luna has to offer it is for mixing. Going full nerdy for this, but well, I'm just to tackle this point of the conversation. When it comes to producing music, I love to do it on Logic Pro and Bitwig Studio, because depending on what I'm working on. If I'm working with something, for example, I recently produced a track for a client for the use for use on promotional material and stuff. I did the entire composition on Logic, but I mixed it here on Luna because I find the workflow for mixing in Luna fantastic. But in my opinion, nothing beats Logic when it comes to producing kind of rock or more traditional music. I mean by traditional, not electronic sounding, okay? Not driven by synthesizers and stuff like that. You can do it as well, but Logic is excellent for recording and particularly producing stuff. Sorry, the thing is that this DAW has actually voice commands, and I have to be mindful of the words I say. And here, Lab Supernova is also saying, hey, Luna, I gotta keep that word out of my mouth for a while. So pretty fun. You're in Cubase. Cubase is excellent. And not as ugly as Reaper. Yeah, I happen to have huge respect for Cubase. It's been there since forever. It's a very old software similar to this one, but it has its sound. It's a sound of its own. Do you have any headphones that I can recommend? Yes, I do. Depending on the budget. The ones that I got here are my Audio-Technica. These guys. Right now they look like they survived the flood, but it's just the aesthetics, because they are in super good shape, because they've been around with me for probably 10 years now, and I know them like the back of my palm. They are super affordable. They are very good sounding. I can trust them for a good chunk of my career for several reasons. I had to work all exclusively on those guys rather than using speakers, but they are very good. And they are affordable. I think they are around $150 if I recall. But if you want to go for something more high-end, and it's one that I am truly keeping my eyes on, and it's been for a few months now, is the ones made by Neumann. They have some headphones, Neumann, like the microphones, or my speakers here. Neumann has a pair of headphones that seems to be very good. I haven't tried them myself yet, but I will soon. And one of the things that I consider to be a very killer app is that they have a very good, they develop a very good software that allows you to mix in Atmos on the headphones, but not binaural. For those of you who don't know the terminology, I spoke like an alien. But for those who do, yeah, it's a big deal. And they are a little bit more expensive. I think they are around close to $500 the pair, if not a little bit less, something like that. But from what I have read, they are very good. But if you are in a budget and you want something that is basically a workhorse, the Audio-Technica, let me remember the model is A40X, something like that. Somewhere here. Give me a sec. Yeah, ATH M50X. I'm gonna write it down, so that way you can have it there. It's ATH M50X. Look at that. Those guys, perfect. I wrote them in the chat. Yeah, those are very good. That's what I'm using. Try Morphit plugin without Technica on your master. Okay. Yeah, I for a good, when I was working exclusively on headphones, I used the SonarWorks plugin that corrects the correction was very good. And I mind that Morphit is also working. And these guys, I can tell you, and I can truly recommend these guys because I use them and I still do. I recently swapped the foam because I don't want to throw them away. They are awesome and they're very good. Tone booster plugin correction. Okay, I'm gonna look at that one as well. So let's finish off today's exercise. Let's do one more thing before we go. Taking a look at our mix, remember that we already have done some more aggressive moves on the stereo field, on the stereo bus, which is the sum of everything. And I like the sound of the bass, but I'm not fully enjoying it, if that makes sense. So let's do a few moves on the bass, because I usually like to go for bass and kick at the beginning of my mixes, after I, of course, get my volume in order. And I think that we're getting to that point. About the Adam H200, I haven't tried those, but yeah, I also seen very good reviews. So here we go. I'm gonna press play, and then we're gonna mess around with the bass. First, let's get familiar with the sound. Immediately. There's a huge nose, like this. It's kind of French. Pay attention to sound. Can you hear it? I think it's very obvious. And we also got a little bit of clipping, so I'm gonna dog down a little bit the gain, just a touch, because we're hitting a little bit too hard. I think it's very obvious, no? It's kind of mid-rangey, but it's low mids, or maybe mid-range. So we're gonna be tackling this nose using this guy, which is the low mid band on my console. Here we go. And we're gonna do the same trick. That's ugly as all F. So, bringing back the rest, I'm gonna be cutting that guy to taste little by little. And I even think that I'm gonna narrow the Q a little bit, because it could kill off some of the punch. It worked beautifully, almost like... Oh, damn it. I gotta be more mindful of the use of my memes. But yeah, let me explain what happened. This particular channel strip, this plugin, has a particularity. This button, you saw that it was swapping while the track was playing. It's changing the EQ, the shape of the EQ. And one of the things that I like about using these plugins, these channel strips, is the fact that not only I can control it from here, but also the fact that I can swap, in this particular case, for different EQs without having to change the frequency that I'm hitting. It has 4 different types, and right now we're using the orange one. Then we go to the brown, and then we go to black. This one, I felt that it is going to be the one that works, because once I begin swapping and adding a little bit more of the low end on the bass, that after I cut, we're going to get a much punchy sound. Let's see. Pay attention to the sound of the kick now. And also, I think this is a moment in which I will go back to my main EQ. I think I'm gonna go less bananas on probably this guy, because that's adding a little bit of that nose that I don't like. Huge change, right? I like it. But I think we reached the end. But don't worry. Next week, because I'm gonna turn this into a recurring show. As I said in the introduction, these are my first forays into this. As you can tell, I have a huge apparatus already working, right? And it's even memes and stuff. It's because I do this weekly on my other channel, which is full-on technical. It's on which, if you wanna learn more about music production, mixing, but full-on, me not trying to sugarcoat everything, going full-on straight to the point and going nerdy as all F, I do it on my other channel. I will add a link to that channel on the description. And it's easy to find. It's Bardon Music Production and Mixing. But I think I'm liking this format in which explaining this to you. And I will turn this into a recurrent thing. It's gonna be weekly. This is like episode 4, but it's been super in and out because there's been plenty of things getting in the way. And since my schedule hasn't been developed with this live stream as part of my daily routine, I couldn't commit. But I think I can. And that's why I little by little turn this into a thing. I think you would enjoy BCS1 channel strip by Fuse Audio Labs. Take a look. I will. Thank you for your recommendation, Victor. I haven't tried that before. As I was saying, I will turn this into a weekly show. I will even create its own visual identity and stuff. I will create its proper thumbnail, because as it is right now, there is no thumbnail. Okay, but stick around. Next week, I will continue with this mix. So anything that I couldn't answer to you today will be addressed next week. Please make sure to leave those comments in the comment section once this live stream is over. And I will stick to the time table as well. It's going to be at 5 p.m. Central Time. So it's going to be the standard timing for this, because it seems that some of you managed to pop up. And I will excuse myself because the first minute and a half or even 2 minutes, there was no audio. And look at the audio engineer. There was something funky going on, and I even began very late, 15 minutes late, because there was many things, technically speaking, that were getting in the way. But now it's sorted, it's working, it's super rock solid. I'm glad that this whole apparatus worked. So I will see you next week. And thank you for the recommendation, Victor Nova and Nova Lab. Look at that, 2 Novas at the same time, as Victor said. Thanks for joining, thanks for watching. If you happen to have enjoyed this and you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing to the channel, because I will do this every week. Plus, the weekly videos in which we analyze music together, discussing its production values and why it rocks. And also, leave a like, because that helps a lot. So with that said, thanks for joining, thank you for watching, and stick around, because I'll see you when I see you. Wrong button. Once again, getting used to this setup. Bye.